Greetings and welcome to the Old Patrol HQ podcast. Today we bring you part 2 of a very special ongoing series called Jeff Milton, the forefather of the modern day LINEWATCH agent, with special guest Air Bear Eltringham, Class 441, and Old Patrol HQ's foremost historian on all things Jeff Milton. He's a supervisory border patrol agent teaching operations at the academy, and he's been researching Jeff Milton for over 20 years. We continue discussing Jeff Milton's story of his younger years. Everyone was something else before they became PAs, right? And sometimes that defines the kind of agents we become. Well, Milton was no different. Come listen as we dive deep into our rich history, heritage, and legacy with a few shenanigans along the way. Good afternoon, Bear, and welcome back to the Old Patrol HQ podcast.
Thanks, Gil. How you been, man?
Well, I've been good, gearing up for a great Thanksgiving, and I hope your family is too, and everybody that's listening. But I want to start out, first of all, by giving out a huge happy birthday shout out to Bortak, because it is today when Chief Brandon Mule, the 14th, he was the 14th chief of the patrol at the time, signed Bortak into being. So even though Bortak, they don't celebrate today officially, they celebrate the first day of the academy or the academy date, that this is the day when Bortak was put into being. And it's the same as the Border Patrol, right? We did the Border Patrol was signed into the law on May 28th, 1924, but the first academy wasn't until a lot later. So happy birthday, Bortak.
There you go. I like your hat. I like your hat there. That you're not bored.
Yeah, well, you know, the first rule of not being Bortak, Bear, is to tell everybody you're not Bortak.
Yeah, I am definitely not. I've done some high speed dudes. There, I am not high. I am low speed, high drag.
Well, you know, maybe we'll start our own elite force called Boar Taco.
Nice. And Boar Snack.
Boar Snack. Oh, I love that one. Boar Snack. That's a good one. That's a real good one.
Yeah.
So for the people that may be listening to this podcast for the first time, because this is going to be the second one we do on our quest to talk about Jeff Milton, the forefather of the modern day LINEWATCH agent, tell us, or introduce yourself to us real quickly and tell us your connection to Jeff Milton.
Like you said, everybody in the Border Patrol pretty much knows me as Bear. If you say my name, most people are like, who? I'm SBPA Eltringham. I am a operations instructor at the Border Patrol Academy. Have been in the Border Patrol for about 23 and a half years. I'm part of 441. Just this past August, I went over 30 years of service total between the military, being a federal technician prior to being a Border Patrol agent. And
congratulations, brother.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a hot minute.
Heck yeah. My
connection to Jeff Milton was I stumbled across him early in my career, having been assigned to the Naco Border Patrol Station in Tucson sector, and Jeff having spent quite a few of his years in and around that area and living ultimately in Tombstone. I ran into a display about him at the Tombstone courthouse, and they said effectively he was the first border patrolman or border patrol agent. So I was like, oh, I'm a border patrol agent. I want to know more about that. And since then, it's been a bit of a quest for me to find out as much as I can about this man, and just it's like chasing ghosts.
But it's been a 20-year labor of love, hasn't it? Because you love all things. You're I think I can honestly say you love Jeff Milton more than I do, and that's saying a lot, right?
Yeah, it's been a lot of cut and sign, to say the least. Talk about that a little bit. But yeah, it's been an interesting going down a lot of trails and finding other characters inside the patrol and learning a lot of history of not only the patrol, but other people connected to the patrol, and even bringing that information forward to today's generation.
And that's the thing. I think people are going to be shocked to know and understand how deeply the thread of Jeff Milton, his life experience and influence had on the patrol, and in many ways still continues on to this day. So, and that's really what we're here for, isn't it, Bear? How would you explain what's our goal? What's our purpose in this series that we're doing on Jeff Milton? Would you say?
I think a lot of what I would like to see is not just what we're bringing forward in this, but what some of our other compatriots that are historians that do a lot of this work for us, is to bring back the pride and bring back the esprit de corps and bring back the deep, rich history that we've, not so much that we've lost it, but we've just not instilled it into ourselves. Not just of this particular person, but across the agency and across, the things that have been done and accomplished by Border Patrol agents throughout time, and bringing those kinds of stories out and finding other leads. Hopefully, as people see these, and maybe they'll hear of something and send us a tidbit or a place or a trail to chase or possibly a document or something along those lines. Not only are they reinforcing what we're doing, but they're reinforcing their commitment to it. This isn't just a job to me. This has been my calling for 23 years. I've dedicated my life to Border Patrol, and I plan to continue to dedicate my life to the agency that has supported me for almost a quarter of a century after I'm done doing this. I mean, I have some dreams and some goals that I want to accomplish post Border Patrol with that.
Amen to that.
Every bit of this is going to be part of that.
And that's the thing, right? So also my joy, one of my biggest joys in life, and one of the reasons I started Old Patrol HQ was because we have a rich epic, right? Mythological, and I don't mean that that it's just mythology, but we are larger than life. Even in reality, the Border Patrol, our history, we're larger than life. And even today, our agents are making history. Even today, we still have those epic sign cutters. We still have those epic highwaymen. We still have those epic drug sniffers out there that will find dope before the dog even finds dope. And that thread has not ended. We have honored that legacy in spite of whatever environment we've been placed in for the time being or whatever. But we are larger than life. And one of the things that really brings that home is remembering how this all got started, right? With the kind of individuals, with the kind of honor and integrity, with the kind of heroic actions that were done in those days that cemented us to who we are all the way to this day.
Yeah, I've had the chance to teach some classes here at the academy, and one of my classes, I literally told them, I said, the United States Border Patrol is the U.S. Marine Corps of law enforcement.
Amen.
And I do that with anybody, anywhere we've been sent, any mission we've been given, anywhere we've had to go, we've figured out a way to get the job done.
Amen.
There's a deep sense of pride to that we need to continue to bring forward.
With a few shenanigans along the way.
Can't have it.
Right? If there ain't shenanigans,
I can literally point back to Jeff Milton and say, "Hey, the original shenanigan guy."
They don't even know, do they? They don't even know. You think you're getting alligated against now. You think you're getting, customer complaints or citizen complaints now. This guy had the best one ever, and we'll get to that as we go. Yeah. So let's go ahead then and start with that overview of Jeff Milton's life. As we go, because like I said, we're going to do this a bit at a time. We're going to take our time with it. We want it to be understood properly, to be communicated properly, and for people to understand. And don't forget, Bear, the Border Patrol historian gods are listening, right? The great Joe Banco and the great Cliff Gill, they're out there listening to us. So we have to be faithful to and as hysterically historical as possible.
Hysterically historical as possible. Great. No, I have immense amounts of respect for those two gentlemen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's just incredible the time, effort, and ability that they've put forward. And I just want to be faithful to that kind of stuff.
They deserve their own candles.
Nice. You can see this coming now. Great. All
So
right.
where do we begin?
I guess we're literally gonna begin where he began. Yeah, as everybody knows, in the Border Patrol, we all have a prior to the patrol. Like
Oh yeah.
every one of us did something prior to what we did as a border patrol agent or are doing as a border patrol agent.
Yeah, prior law enforcement, prior military, real estate agents, bartenders, right? You name it. We
Yep.
PAs were something before they joined the patrol.
And one of the things that the patrol has always been very good about is exploiting you and your abilities for their use and their to accomplish the mission for the by using the things that you did before you became a border patrol agent.
No, no, tell me it's not so. Come on.
Yeah, you running heavy equipment, you know how to weld.
Oh
What?
yeah. A little
You
carpentry background there, a little,
exactly.
yes, yes.
We're a plumber. Oh man, we got some stuff we got to fix. Yeah. So I mean, but we also even in today, we have a guy that's he just graduated the academy about less than a year ago, and he speaks multiple languages and he's really good computer wise. And he went down there just as a young trainee PA and started processing like it was his second calling,
Hmm.
and developed some things for his sector, and has helped things progress on almost a national scale within a year. And it's not, he did them because that's what he did before he came in, like
Yeah.
he knew how to do that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't know, I mean, Jeff had a lot of things that he did before he got to the patrol, but we're going to start diving in a little bit.
Let's do that.
As I say, first, kind of tie some of this in, he was born in Florida in 1861. He was born in a place called Mariana, Florida. I was lucky enough to have passed through there last year. I was moving some of my things that were in Virginia, where I was last stationed at headquarters, and I was coming back when I went to visit some friends. I had taken some personal time, and as I was driving down I-10, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right. Where Jeff Milton was from is right here off of I-10." And sure enough, I took a picture of the road sign and then pulled over and got a soda and that kind of thing. I didn't have a lot of time to actually stop and be able to spend time, but I was able to take a picture of the sign off of I-10. It's right there on I-10, Mariana, and then you can get out there, and then it's the place where he was born was a place called Sylvania, and it is no longer there. None of the buildings are actually there anymore. Fire destroyed it after not long after his father passed away, and so throughout time things have been changed and things came down, but there is a historical marker there denoting that. Jeff was the youngest son born to the governor of Florida during that during the Civil War. Actually, I sent a document to you, and I can read a little bit of the document, but it's a letter. I'm not exactly sure who it was written to at the time, but it's probably the first mention I have of him. Okay. And it's him written by his father, and it says, "Florida is styled as the land of flowers, has fertile soil, healthy climate, polite, intelligent, and patriotic citizens, and I should be happy to receive a visit from you and see you shake by the hand my last born, named Jefferson Davis Milton. He is but a week old, and I have not yet seen him, but friends write to me that his countenance indicates a consciousness that he bears the name of a soldier and a statesman." And it's signed by John Milton, his father. So he was very much at the end of the war, his dad, as by most accounts, say that he committed suicide. And so he was left to be raised by his mother. His mother had John Milton, his father, and his mother had 10 children together, Jeff being the last. There was also an older brother from a previous marriage that was there as well. So Mr. Milton Sr.'s first marriage, he had a son, and then his daughter died during, I believe, childbirth, or his wife died during childbirth. I believe. I'll have to check again and make sure. There's so many facts running around here.
Right, but before we move on to him, right, real quick, but just backing up to his background, we don't have to list him, but reading through the book, you see that his ancestors, before him, statesmen, warriors, soldiers.
Yep, his grandfather was a captain in the Continental Army in the War of 1812. He was also the first Secretary of State for the state of Georgia. There is a Milton County, Georgia, north of Atlanta. His great grandfather was fought in the Revolution. I've seen some documentation of when they came over in the 1600s to Virginia area and then migrated down into North Carolina. But one of his distant relatives was Milton, John Milton, the poet from England.
Oh,
yeah. So
Paradise Lost.
Paradise Lost, exactly.
Great book too.
So yeah, you can count him as one of his relatives. So yeah.
So he ended up getting raised by his aunt.
Well, he was raised by his mom and his and basically some of his sisters. I'm not sure. I got to go back and look at, like I said, I got to continue to look at the numbers because there's so many different things that go on. But
yes,
it says that he was raised by his sisters, which kind of has to be like being raised by a pack of wolves.
You sound like you speak from experience.
I had a couple sisters, but not that. But no, they raised him. And the one thing that was very clear was there was a delineating line. Jeff never really knew. So his dad died, and he was 3 years old. So he never knew really the whole the South prior to the Civil War kind of thing, like the antebellum lifestyle or anything like that. He didn't know that. He was never part of that. His sisters and brothers and even said that like maybe it was sad that he didn't have any of that, but he did have, his family, taught him, he was cultured. He was cultured in Southern mannerism and Southern honor. And, he comes from some aristocracy, a bit of aristocracy, but he was never, it never really, he wanted to be a warrior. He wanted to go out. He, like every little boy, he wants to be. They play cowboys and Indians and things like that. And he grew up around, literally running around the swamps of Florida, catching fish and shooting deer and all that. Like one of the stories that
practical jokes.
Yeah, practical jokes on people. Like there's a story about him bringing an alligator to a person that was cooking meals and stuff, and they'd be like, they didn't want to touch any alligator. He's like, oh, that's not alligator.
That's fish,
that's fish. That's funny looking fish. You go, oh, it's fish. It's
where
fish.
Are the bones?
Yeah, where are the bones? Oh, I deboned it for you. You ain't never deboned a fish for me in your life, Jeff Milton. And no, really. And so, he waited until it was all done and everybody had eaten. He goes, that was that? And everybody was like, so, the practical joking side of him, he was, and from all accounts, he continued that through his lifetime. He was very much a practical joker, but also very much an honorable person. As we get into some further things, keeping not just being honorable enough to, if somebody asked him, hey, I would rather that somebody didn't know this, that it's okay, but I would rather that our other compatriots not know that. Okay, I can honor that.
Like the fact that one of his commanding officers didn't know how to read.
Exactly.
That's
what I'm getting. That's what I'm talking about.
And he kept that secret from them. And then, but he was probably a little better educated than most of the people around him in those times, perhaps when he went to Texas.
Yeah.
He was a well-cultured man.
Yeah. And he actually taught one of his fellow Rangers how to read and how to write. And it, basically the same way he learned how to with a reader and just a piece of chalk and a slate, kind of thing. But that's getting ahead. So yeah, there was even a little bit of a joke about that, like, kind of preceded his birth because of his name, that this individual had arrived and everybody was showing up, and it was like, no, the baby. And they brought the baby out, and it was Jeff Milton, and he was like, hey, there he is. And they were like, oh, nice practical joke. So it started pretty much with his birth and kept on going. So but yeah, he had a lot of people in his life that are in his background, statesmen, soldiers. So he came from stock that served and both politically and in action.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of his thing. And I keep catching myself on my whisker words here, and
yeah, but let me is it fair to say, so one of the things that I know, it's tough for people to hear nowadays, but his family did own slaves.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they did.
Is it fair to say that he learned just as much as a kid growing up around the people that worked for that were slaves to his, that were on that land, that taught him, that played with him, that fed him, that clothed him, that even helped raise him?
Yes, he was very influenced by that, and I want to make it a point of saying that he was also, he was not a person who thought that he was better than them. He didn't look at himself as a grand person, to the point of, in his lifetime, when he was actually out doing the work along the border, he lived among the Native Americans, and they respected him and he respected them, and like, they thought great things of him. And he always, the one thing that they would say at his retirement literally was like, that he had a network of friends who were always willing to give him a hand and always willing to point him in a direction to help him, because of his demeanor and how the type of person that he was. And that's the kind of person that we needed to develop and that we needed to have for the good of our service. Yeah. So from a young age, he was taught that, hey, this is who we are and where we are. And, you are no better than the next person.
Yeah.
He
even got disciplined by the slaves that worked for his parents, right? He even got his hide tanned a few times.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They takes a village to raise a child, so we weren't afraid to, and there was nothing wrong with that. So yeah, he, going forward from that, there's a lot of things in the book that A Good Man with a Gun, that right up front, that talk about, where he worked, what the places were like where he grew up young. And then
I noticed that too, Bear, that I noticed that this author doesn't just talk about Jeff Milton, but he takes a lot of time to explain what was going on in those days.
Right.
And one of the things that caught my eye when I was reading it is that Jeff Milton read the history of William Wallace.
Oh yeah, the Scottish Chiefs.
And that was one of the things that really got him fired up to go out and look for that warrior lifestyle, that active lifestyle.
Yep. Yeah, that was his favorite book, was The Scottish Chiefs, and it was about like William Wallace and those. And he read it so much he could quote it. And it's like any other book that you read that many times that has that kind of an impact on you. You can say that for any type of book. I want to live to that standard. The standard was was that warrior style of life, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to prove himself. He wanted to be a man. He did, he sought out those types of adventures in his life to he never really like I said in the last podcast, he never really owned a whole lot, but he was rich in friendship and rich in relationships and people who knew him, and rich in just an interesting, adventurous life.
All the way to the end. And that's one of the things that we have to take into consideration, is that when you're reading this book, right? Everybody has a different copy, but when you're reading this book, most of it is spoken directly from Jeff Milton to J. Everett Haley, right?
Yeah. J. Everett Haley did a lot of incredible scholarship on this book. You will find this book footnoted. He did a lot of travel when he would third party verify a lot of things that happened, because he wanted it to be literally, he wanted to not just take someone's specific word for it. He wanted a witness or something like that where that could corroborate that. And he said, honestly, a lot of times what he would find was that Milton downplayed the things that he did, and the other people were like, it was epically better than that. Like, no, he was just. There's a story late in J. Everett Haley's book about him talking to the doctor when he was much older, and he had talked about tracking some outlaws up in the Mogollon, and that's the story kind of faded out, and he never got to the point of where he got them or didn't get them. And and it's said that the doctor asked him, he said, well, Jeff, what happened to them? Where are they? And he said, well, they're still there.
They never left. They never left, right? And that's the thing about it, is that when the way this guy writes, he doesn't write whether it's right or wrong, bad or good or indifferent. He just writes what he sees. Right. And so you could read it, 100 years later and say, well, I don't like this, I don't like that. But that doesn't matter, because he's just telling you in the words they used, in the times of it, and like you said,
of the day.
Yeah, but this guy's scholarship is fantastic, because again, all of a sudden I find myself, I'm like, I'm not even reading about Jeff Milton right now. I'm reading about everything that was going on around him. Right. And he paints you a picture of the whole, everything going on around Jeff Milton, and then how Jeff Milton happens to fit into that in that situation.
Right. And it's very rich language.
Yes,
the book is written in very, very rich language.
It's like trying to translate a King James sometimes.
Sometimes that there are points when I'm like, I don't know that word. I got to go look that up. Yeah. I am not that smart.
But we know, in one of the spots we were talking about how on page 17 of the book, right? It has a certain phrase that it mentions that we haven't been able to find where else that's, if that's not the first time that those words were ever used.
Right. Yeah. Getting to that, after he grew up in Florida at the age of 16, he went to, I said 15 last time, and I actually went back and looked at my notes, and it was actually 16.
Yeah.
He went to Texas to live with his older sister, and her husband, Colonel Yarborough. And Colonel Yarborough was so now he went to Navasota, Texas, which is actually, I looked it back up and I can talk to it a little bit better. It is between Houston and Waco, and it is actually between Houston and College Station, down there close to Houston. And there's a like Colonel Yarborough lake or something like that now. Yarborough Lake or something.
Yeah.
That talks about his brother-in-law. And Colonel Yarborough, and he and another man owned a mercantile company. The other man's name was Wilson, and They had a mercantile store in Anderson, one in the town of Yarborough, where that lake is kind of at. There used to be a town there. There was also one in the town of Navasota. I sent you some links. I don't know if we could put any of those out, or we'll figure out a way to
Yeah.
eventually one or
If
the other.
anybody out there knows how to post links and pictures and everything else in these videos, man, we could use the help because we're still typewriting, 213s around here.
Right. But yeah, there's some pictures of the building. It still stands in Navasota, Texas. It's a brick building that was erected in 1871, and that would have been, as far as I can tell, that would have been the building that Jeff Milton actually worked in when he went to work for his brother-in-law. It's I was trying to see if I could come up with the address real quick, but so there's a little bit of I would say that's probably a little bit of a tie-in for everybody down in RGV. So first we had Miami and New Orleans sector with
Right.
being there in the Panhandle. So any agents in like Mobile or over in Jacksonville or Tampa or anything like that, you guys where he's from, you can go up there and see where he's from if it interests you. And if you find any tidbits on any information down there, and feel free to send them to me. I'd love to have them. I'd love to add them to what I know.
Yep.
That kind of thing. Like, so now that he's gone to Texas, Navasota, that's going to be in Houston. So that'll tie in to you guys down there in RGV and Corpus Christi, and you're probably a lot closer than anybody else up there. But yeah, Navasota, Texas is where his brother-in-law and his sister lived. His sister had actually originally gone out there to teach school. She met the colonel out there. They got married. Later on, Jeff came out that direction. He worked for Colonel Yarborough for a little while. Colonel Yarborough was the first man to give Jeff a cigar. I always thought that he might have been the first guy to put a gun in his hand, but actually his brother was the guy that did it, and it was a deer shooting when they had been deer hunting in Florida. He actually was checking the load in his muzzle loading rifle and he was so nervous when this deer came out that he left the ramrod in. He shot the deer with the ramrod and all.
Oh, jeez. But that also, right? Isn't there another time when he was a youngster when he was chewing tobacco and he happened to walk in?
I don't know how many I don't know how many y'all PAs that chew tobacco or learned how to chew tobacco when you were a kid. But yeah, his mom, somebody had given some chewing tobacco when he was a young boy, and his mom found out and she said, "Jeff Milton, you come over here," and he took a big swallow and swallowed everything. And his mom was like, "Are you chewing tobacco?" And he said, "No, ma'am, I am not." And she made him show her his mouth, and he didn't have any tobacco in it. And she let him go, and he ran to his sister's and throwing up the whole way.
Yeah, he had to get out of there as quickly as possible because he was getting ready to throw up.
Green.
That's hilarious.
He's definitely turning green. So
I'll tell you one of my pet peeves. I will not, if I get a dirty ride, or even if I get a ride without gas, I'm like, whatever, after a while you just clean it and do it yourself. But I never left a ride like that. But the one thing I cannot stand, Bear, is getting into a ride and seeing someone's spit cup right there.
Yep.
That I will report to a soup.
Yeah.
I hate that. And then I accidentally took a sip of one time. Oh God. Because I put my coffee next to it because I was waiting for a spot to throw it away. And I just reached up and, without thinking like I do right now. I mean, this is just like instinct. And I took a sip of that. Oh, even now. Now.
Yeah. So yeah, at 16, he went to Texas. He worked for the captain or for the colonel there for a while. And then one of his other relatives would have been one of Colonel Yarborough's things would have one of his relatives actually basically it was a repeating rifle in his hand. And it was a 44, and he was like, "Oh, I got to go find a way to use this." And not long after that, there were a couple people who worked that were like worked for Colonel Yarborough and Wilson's mercantile stores and stuff, like bookkeepers and stuff. There was a couple guys that headed out to West Texas. A guy by the name of Captain Hatchett. He'd gone out and towards basically over towards Fort Griffin, Texas. Established a ranch. They went down to South Texas. They bought some longhorn cattle, and instead of having to brand them right off the bat, what they did was they cut off the ends of their horns. They cut their horns down, and hence the Sawhorn Cattle Company was born on the Clear Fork of say they called it the Clear Fork River, and he worked out there for a season. Basically, it was a full year, pretty much.
Do you remember how much he was making a month?
$15.
50 cents a day, baby. Yep. Wow.
He's making $15 a month. And he had to supply his what was it? He had to supply his own saddle, bedroll, his bridle, all that kind of stuff. So his working gear, he had to supply all that. And then they supplied like beans and coffee and salt and pepper and soda and flour and that kind of thing. And if you wanted meat, he just basically had to go get it himself. But according to the time that in that area, there was a lot of turkeys and a lot of turkeys and a lot of antelope and a lot of deer in that area. In fact,
it talks about the fact that one time he got invited to dinner and there was no meat on there. He's like, "What is going on here?"
Yeah. He got invited to he was doing his rounds, kind of doing checking his range area for Mustangs and things like that. And he had ended up going to this preacher's house that had found there was this preacher out on the plains, and he had ended up going to that guy's house, and the guy had said that he was looking at he was blessing the meal of meat and sustenance, and Jeff said he looked down and there was nothing but corn mush in the bowl.
No meat.
He said no meat. So the next morning he got up and he went out and he shot a bunch of turkeys and stuff like that for the preacher and kind of helped him out. And
a couple of deer and
a couple of turkeys. And he said that way the next time that the man said the blessing, he would at least be true and factual.
Yeah, it would mean it. Yes.
Yeah, so we have some meat next time. So, hey, he helped out a fellow.
Kind of guy he was, yeah.
Yeah. So and
from the beginning, right? So he's in his teens.
Yeah, I would say about that time he was probably 17. But he worked for Captain Hatchett and the Sawhorn Cattle Company, and ended up he did winter over with them out there, and they put him out by himself in a tent, basically out on the plains in the winter. And his job was to basically keep the wild Mustangs away from his remuda of horses that he was. So they had a lot of the broke horses that were out there free ranging in the wintertime because they didn't need them at the time. They're waiting on spring to come and calves to come and that kind of thing so that they could brand and work the herd and sell off some and take them up to market. But so the horses are just out there free grazing and free running. And at that point in time of history, there were no, fences. There weren't, It was all open rangeland. And so he worked that, and he would, and every once in a while he'd go into town and to get supplies at Fort Griffin and that kind of thing. That's and that was back in the days of the buffalo hunters and the mule skinners and that kind of thing. He said that Fort Griffin was a pretty rowdy place at that time, and that was where he saw his first shooting. Basically, was there. Two buffalo hunters got in a fight, and they pulled guns, and one didn't walk away. And so he found out at that point how precious life is and how quick it can be taken away. So he wintered over, and from that point, did some spring stuff, and then headed back to collected his paycheck and headed back. One of the interesting things, though, like we said in the book, talks about basically the way that they would keep the wild horses, and the how he would keep his broke horses away was like he would ride around his range, and it literally says in quotes on page 17 of his book, it says Jeff daily circled his range, quote, cutting for sign, to see if Mustangs had got into his herd. So I don't know if there's ever been a quote first time that cutting for sign has been mentioned or not anywhere, but this book was written in the late 1940s. It was published in 1948. So the patrol had been around for a while before that. So I'm sure that was not a coined phrase for this book, but like I said, it's one of those things where we can say, hey, he was cutting for sign back in the
where would the author have gotten that? I mean, we know that he talked directly to Jeff Milton, so it must have been Jeff Milton who told them, yeah, I was cutting sign.
Well, and I'm sure that that's a colloquial term that's been used, around all kinds of places. There were trackers, there were people who would hunt, they were scouts, they were all that kind of stuff. So all of those people through the Indian Wars,
so that probably predates the patrol.
Yeah, I was gonna say well beyond the predation of the patrol. It's just one of those things where it was just really kind of fun to sit down and look at that and go, look at that. He was cutting for sign.
Cutting for sign back in the 1880s. So
yeah, literally. So yeah, it was kind of cool to see that connection, and hear that. It was very interesting.
So even like we're trying to talk right now, we're trying to establish the root history of the patrol, but even long before the patrol, those roots were being planted little by little, right? And it seems like it all came and culminated when the Border Patrol was created. And we took all those and we just made them our own.
I was gonna say from 1,000 different jobs, Border Patrol agents, tens of thousands of jobs, Border Patrol agents have brought those skills and that history along with them to our organization to make it what it is today.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
So yeah, he ran around there for a while, and a couple of the people that he met during that time period come back into play later on in his life, around that Fort Griffin area and that kind of thing. People. So a guy by the name of John Selman. John Selman will come back into play later on. John Wesley Hardin. He would have probably known about him after he went from the Sawhorn Cattle Company back to Navasota, prior to his next big step in life. He was a prison guard, and John Wesley Hardin happened to be in prison there at that time. And one of the other guys that he met was a guy that he ran around with a lot for a long period of time, and that was George Scarborough.
Yeah, George Scarborough. Now he gets to meet John Wesley Hardin one more time, doesn't he? Later on, and we'll talk about that then. But we'll just tease it out for now.
Yeah. So John Selman, John Wesley Hardin, and then the fortuitous meeting of George Scarborough and his thoughts on him, of that he found him to be a really good guy and somebody he would be willing to associate himself with throughout his lifetime, and to do a lot of different work in in basically law enforcement. And for all of you guys that are in El Paso sector, George Scarborough is buried in Deming. So you guys in Deming, New Mexico, George Scarborough was shot and ended up dying in Deming, New Mexico, and is buried there. So,
and he has got a history in his own right, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. I've definitely chased a little bit of that one, but not nearly as much. Just read a few things about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very interesting early position. And then at that point, they said Jeff basically decided it was at that point that he had come back from he had collected his money from his cowboying work, and they started back to Navasota, and within a short distance they were broke. Cowboying didn't pay, and it doesn't pay a lot today. To this day it still doesn't pay an incredible amount of money.
Yeah,
people do it because they love it. They do it for the life.
Yeah, but he wasn't satisfied with that life.
He was not satisfied with that life. So he was on his way back, and they had to work their way back. It was kind of funny. They didn't have enough money, so they would work for their board, and they would they they would stop and try and make some money here and there, work day working and that kind of thing, which is still practiced today in that industry, is day working. There's a lot of that still going on. And then they finally got back to Navasota. He hired on at the Huntsville prison, working as a prison guard. And it was right around that time that the famous bank incident happened.
Oh yeah, the check cashing incident.
Check cashing incident. That was right at the end of that period of time. He had been paid from his work and deposited that money in a bank.
So he knew it was there.
He knew that money was there. The bankers decided they were going to close and keep everything, and he cashed a check before they got out of town. Let's just say.
I think his secret code on his credit card was 45.
Long Colt.
But also one of the funny stories that I like is, many times that I have laid in on groups, I find that all of a sudden I got stuff crawling on me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think a lot of us PAs that have been, bitten by insects, bitten by spiders, bitten by tarantulas.
Yeah.
Right. Have a little bit of a connection to Jeff Milton.
Yeah. On his way back from before he got back to Navasota, they were sleeping, and he was back in that day. They rolled out their bedroll, and they slept on top of their blanket on the ground, but they used their saddles as as pillows, and happened to feel something on him. Went to brush it off. It was a tarantula, and it had bit him right over his jugular vein.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Right over his jugular vein there, and I guess it swelled up pretty bad, and he ended up, one of the doctors in the next town doctored him up a little bit, kind of got him on his way, and he survived. But yeah, got bit in the throat by a tarantula.
Well, I like to say that Jeff Milton got bit by a tarantula, and after 3 days of excruciating pain, the tarantula died.
Exactly.
But just for our border historians, I can't confirm that.
Yeah. Well, that was ended up he got back, like I said. He had his famous, he had got paid from Huntsville prison, and had his famous check cashing incident.
ATM incident.
He had the ATM incident, and then from there he went along, found out that the Texas Rangers were hiring, and so armed with a letter of recommendation from his brother-in-law, Colonel Yarborough, and another prominent citizen of the town of Navasota, who was He had happened to be the attorney general for the state of Texas at one point, and was a lawyer. They both vouched for his character. They didn't vouch for his age.
Yeah.
They vouched for his character. And he took those letters, and so it was Colonel Yarborough's name was John Quincy Yarborough, and the other guy's name was H. Boone. And part of me wonders if maybe he was part of Daniel Boone's family.
Maybe. I was thinking more along the lines of an ancestor for Boone's Bourbon.
Nice. But yeah, so he headed over to the Rangers in Austin and reported in, and to Mr. Jones, who was the colonel of the Texas Rangers at that point. And the colonel asked him, he said, "What's your age, sir?" And he said, 21. He only stretched it by 3 years. He was 18.
He was 18 years old. Yeah. And that was in July 27th of 1880.
Yeah. So he stretched it a little bit there. And even the colonel said, you don't look 21. And he says, he asked him, he said, "How old are you?" He said, he said 21. He said, "You don't look it." And he said, "But I think you'll make a good ranger." So the colonel turned to his clerk and said, "Swear him in." And he got sworn in as a Texas Ranger at the age of 18.
Which was happening a lot, right? In other words, in those days, a lot of guys were, they weren't as well known as he is, but they did lie about their age to get in to those kind of jobs.
Well, not just that, but think about even more recently in our history, World War II. How many people, how many men lied about their age and joined the military to go fight for our country during World War II after we were attacked and things like that. I don't see it as a, did he lie? Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I'll admit it. But at the same time, he had the fortitude to actually do the job. So
and he had already decided, if they press me on the issue and they ask me directly, to prove it or to swear to it.
Right. He wouldn't have been able to do it. He said it had been too much of a strain on his Southern honor.
Right? And so we'll overlook that for the sign of the times. But I want to kind of end there, because I want to do a good treatment of his. He did 4 years in the Texas Ranger, right? 3 years. Okay. 3 years. So I do want to highlight some of that stuff, because then that leads to other places, especially once he gets to Arizona, before he even becomes a Chinese immigration inspector. Some of his best and most well-known adventures happen there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it keeps getting better and better as we go along throughout this.
We haven't even scratched we're just basically laying the groundwork here for, his upbringing, his background, his character, that he's doing all these things at 16 and 17. And if you read the book, you're realizing that he's got some kind of code of honor, and he is already feared by others, and respected, right, by those around him, and the way he carries himself. And so that was all laying the foundation and groundwork. Of course, nobody's born with experience. So you have to gain your experience. And so they're again, what we're just barely getting into the point where we're going into the really epic stuff.
Well, even what he says, like just a quote from the book, it says, "Pretty young for a ranger," he later admitted, "but boys were men before they were out of their teens in those days."
How about that?
He was expected to be a man very young. He was in a world that expected him to stand up and be a man for him, on his own. He didn't have anything to fall back on, really. So he had to make his way in the world, and he chose to use intestinal fortitude, stand up and say, "Hey, I'm going to volunteer myself for this position, and I'm going to go forth and I'm going to do it." And that's even today. We get young people at the academy that are 18 years old
Mhm.
that have just graduated high school. They've never done anything in terms of but they've decided to live somewhat of a life of service. They want to be part of something bigger than just themselves.
Yes.
That I think for those young individuals that are looking at coming in the patrol, or those young ones that are real young, and that, like, I literally, my last class, I had a young man that I handed a pair of my handcuffs to when he graduated, and I said, "These handcuffs have more time on this planet than you have."
Yeah.
I said, "And I expect to see him back when you retire." And he said, "Yes, sir." And I had a young lady that was 18 years old in my class, and you know, I think what they've seen is they've seen the example of other border patrol agents, because a lot of them come from that border region, and they've seen the example of agents and how they carry themselves and the job that they do and the
Mhm.
things that they accomplish. And some of them have been their coaches in sports, and some of them have been, members of their churches and things like that. So we have set an example that those young people want to become, and want to be part of something bigger, and they want to be one of us. They want to be who we are. And I think sometimes the generation gets a real bad rap, but at the same time, there are still people out there willing to step forward and do this job to
Well,
this day.
let's talk about that just for a brief moment. So, a kid comes to you and says, "You know what? I'm thinking of joining the patrol, but the way things look right now, I don't know. What do I do? What do you think? What do you think about youngsters joining the patrol right now? What would you say to them?"
I tell them, you will find that you will do things in the United States Border Patrol that you would never imagine.
Okay, yeah, I'll
And I'm
say.
talking about being the opportunities today to do things that the ways that they can go, and the paths that their careers can take. You can be a line agent, cut and sign your entire career, and I know lots of them, and they are, like you said, there are sign cutters out there to this day that can tell you that man has 27 cents in his right rear pocket and a
Yeah,
flat spot on his left shoe.
yep, and two
You know,
divorces.
and that's on pavement. You know what I mean? Like, there are
Yes,
people that have that gift.
yes, they
There
do.
are people that have the gift of being able to take and translate a computer program into something that helps the entirety of the border patrol across the entire spectrum of how we do business the way we do it. Um, I had the opportunity when I was in PAO in Tucson to go with Borstar to Chiapas, Mexico, and watch them train Grupo Beta in technical rescue, both water and swift water rescue, mountain technical rescue, cave rescue, that kind of thing. And I was there to document it. And I'm like, we actually had a saying during that trip. It was really kind of interesting because we were trying to we needed to train some of them how to swim, and we didn't have a spot. So literally there was probably 6 of us riding around in the open bed of a Grupo Beta truck at midnight on a Mexican military special forces base, looking for a general to ask him if we could borrow his pool so we could train them how to swim. And we're like, when you joined the Border Patrol, did you ever think you would do this? And I was
Yeah,
like,
I can't
absolutely
tell you how many
not.
times I said that to myself in my career. What other job would have got me where I in places that you never even know one day to the next.
Right. And it's not just those things. We represent we go and represent our country in other countries because we can work as part of this. You can get assigned to the CBP attaché in another company, in another country. Other countries come to us and say, teach us how to do what it is that you do, because we're the best in the world at it. um, I was involved with a program at headquarters that they went to different countries and showed other countries how to do this stuff. And now, I mean, it's had such an impact on how we do business that it's literally made its way to the UN. And in order for people to actually request dollar figures from the UN for a border mission, they have to actually be trained by us in this process of how to do this. Who, like, how in the world did that come from me sitting at, in my office and running into two PAs talking about chasing people through the desert?
Yeah.
And hey, sign me up to that. Like,
yeah.
I look at people today and say, this isn't forever. This isn't what you're seeing now. There will be shifts. There will be change. Be willing and ready to embrace change, because it will always be happening, and be
Amen.
open to saying yes. When the opportunity presents itself, be open and willing to say yes at the time that it opens and presents itself, because you will be. And the other thing is, we talk about it at the academy. What's your currency in the Border Patrol? Your currency is your reputation. Are you willing to do the dirty work? Are you willing to do the stuff that just is no fun? Nobody likes to do it. Everybody hates processing. But you know what? Are you willing to step in there, take charge, and go handle it? Because if you are, the people who are in positions over you will look at that and go, those are the people that I know, if I put them in this position, that they will go and execute on that job. Right. So be that kind of person.
Amen. So we're about to put this one to bed. Give us a preview of what we're going to talk about next week. Or the following week, depending on how Thanksgiving works out.
So next week, we're going to talk about Jeff's time in the Texas Rangers, some of the areas that he worked. Get ready, Big Ben and El Paso. We'll point out some places and talk about some things. We're going to talk about some of the people that he knew. There may be a special guest
coming soon. Yes.
There may be a couple of artifacts shown during that that are pretty interesting. So you'll have that to look forward to. And
excellent.
Then we'll keep going forward from there and talking about some of the other things that he did in his life.
That sounds like a good plan. And for everybody listening, please share and subscribe to the channel. And we're going to be putting this out along with other podcasts. I plan on interviewing a few board tackers that went to Class 1. I just put out a video. I'm putting out a video today of an interview I had with one of the guys that went to Board Tack 1 as well. He talks a little bit about how all that worked out. So it's all about that rich history, heritage, and legacy, right? With a few shenanigans along the way.
There you go. All right.
Robert,
be good, man.
Thank you so much. Have a great Thanksgiving. And everybody listening, have a great Thanksgiving this week. And the best is still yet to come, isn't it?
Yep. All right. Have a good one.
You too, brother. Take care.
All right.
Thank you for joining us for this special edition of the Old Patrol HQ podcast. Bear and I will continue to walk you through the life and times of Jeff Milton, the forefather of the modern-day LineWatch agent, and the best is yet to come. Please subscribe and share this podcast dedicated to the rich history, heritage, and legacy of the patrol with a few shenanigans along the way. Also, follow Old Patrol HQ for the best and most honest coverage of this current border invasion with intel straight from the field, raw and unfiltered. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and visit my store full of the most unique and exclusive Old Patrol gear at oldpatrolhq.bigcartel.com. Until next time, honor first, honor always, or no honor at all.